You think you're better than me, don't you? You think you can just take what's mine? Elliot's voice cracked like a whip, his blue eyes blazing as he loomed over Lila in the glittering ballroom, the crowd frozen, champagne flutes trembling in their hands. Her breath caught, her heart pounding, but she held his gaze, her mahogany skin glowing under the chandeliers, her simple cotton dress replaced by a gown that shimmered like starlight. Lila Grace Thompson stood in the cavernous kitchen of Elliot Carver's Manhattan penthouse, her hands trembling as she polished a silver tray. The city skyline sparkled beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, a world of wealth she'd never touch. At 25, Lila's deep brown eyes held a quiet resilience, though her shoulders hunched slightly, a habit from years of fading into the background. Her tightly coiled hair was pinned neatly, her faded blue dress clean but threadbare at the hem. She moved with a soft grace, her fingers quick but careful, as if afraid to disturb the air. Elliot burst into the kitchen, his tailored suit pristine, his pale face flushed with irritation. At 30, he was a tech mogul who'd built a fortune on apps that tracked people's every move, his sharp jaw and icy blue eyes making him look like a predator in a boardroom. He slammed a tablet on the counter, startling Lila. "Where's Marissa? This place is a mess and I've got investors coming in 2 hours." Lila's voice was soft, almost a whisper. "She's upstairs, sir, organizing the linens. I can—" "Useless," he snapped, cutting her off. "Why do I even keep you around? Do something right for once." He didn't wait for a reply, storming out as quickly as he'd come. Lila's hands stilled, her lips pressing into a thin line. She swallowed the sting, her mother's voice echoing in her mind. "Keep your head high, Lila Grace. You're more than they see." Marissa Wells, the head housekeeper, appeared moments later, her graying braids tucked under a crisp cap, her hazel eyes sharp with concern. At 45, she carried herself with the authority of someone who'd seen it all. Her medium brown skin glowed under the kitchen lights, her hands resting on her hips. "Don't let him get to you, child," she said, her voice warm but firm. "He's angry at the world, not you." Lila managed a small smile. "I know, Miss Marissa. Just hard sometimes." Marissa's gaze softened. "You're stronger than you think. Always have been." She'd known Lila since she was a girl, back when Lila's mother cleaned houses too, dreaming of her daughter becoming a teacher. That dream had died with her, leaving Lila to carry it like a weight. The doorbell chimed and Lila hurried to answer it, her sneakers silent on the marble floor. Outside stood James Jimmy Carter, a lanky 28-year-old delivery driver with ebony skin and a warm smile that crinkled his brown eyes. His hoodie was slightly frayed, but his posture was easy, confident. He held a crate of wine, his gaze lighting up when he saw Lila. "Hey, Lila Grace," he said, his voice teasing. "You still workin' for Mr. Moneybags?" She blushed, tucking a stray curl behind her ear. "Hush, Jimmy. You know I need this job." He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "You deserve better than this place. Always have." His words carried a warmth that made her heart skip, but she brushed it off. Jimmy had been her friend since they were kids, running through Harlem's streets, dreaming of bigger things. He'd always been there, but lately his glances lingered longer. "Get that wine to the cellar," Marissa called, breaking the moment. Jimmy winked at Lila and headed inside, his stride loose but purposeful. As the day wore on, Elliot's mood darkened. The investors' dinner was a high-stakes affair, and he barked orders at the staff, his anger a storm cloud over. The penthouse. Lila moved invisibly, setting tables, refilling glasses, her presence barely acknowledged by the guests in their designer clothes. One woman, her diamonds glinting, raised an eyebrow at Lila's simple dress. "Charming help," she murmured to her companion, her tone dripping with disdain. Lila's cheeks burned, but she kept her eyes down, her mother's words her shield. After the guests left, Elliot called Lila to his study, a sleek room of glass and steel. He was pacing, his tie loosened, a glass of whiskey in his hand. "You," he said, pointing at her. "You're always so quiet. What's your deal? You think you're above this job?" "No, sir," Lila said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I'm grateful to be here." He scoffed, pulling a black credit card from his wallet. "Grateful, sure. Let's see what you're really made of." He tossed the card at her, and it landed on the floor. She stared at it, confused. "Go on," he said, his tone mocking. "Take it. Spend whatever you want. Prove you're not as boring as you seem." Lila's fingers hesitated, then picked up the card. It felt heavy, foreign. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Elliot smirked, but his eyes were cold. Because I can, and because I want to see what someone like you does with power you'll never have again. She clutched the card, her mind reeling. This wasn't a gift. It was a test. A cruel game. But as she left the study, her steps slow, a spark flickered in her chest. She thought of her mother, of the kids in her old neighborhood, of dreams left to wither. Maybe this card could be more than Elliot's taunt. Maybe it could change something. That night, alone in her tiny apartment, Lila sat on her worn couch, the card in her hands. She thought of Jimmy's smile, Marissa's strength, and the children she saw every day, playing in the streets with no place safe to go. Her shyness warred with a growing resolve. She wouldn't use this for herself. She'd use it for them. Lila sat at her small kitchen table, though, black credit card gleaming under the dim light of a single bulb. Her fingers traced its edges, the weight of Elliot's challenge pressing against her chest. She'd always been invisible to people like him, a shadow in their world of excess. But this card, this reckless, cruel gesture, felt like a crack in that invisibility. Her deep brown eyes flickered with something new, defiance. She wouldn't let Elliot's game define her. The next morning, Lila arrived at the penthouse early, her cotton dress replaced by a slightly newer one, though still modest, its hem no longer frayed. She moved through her tasks with quiet precision, but her mind was elsewhere, spinning with possibilities. Marissa noticed the change, her sharp hazel eyes narrowing as she watched Lila scrub the marble counters. "You're awfully quiet today, child," Marissa said, her voice low, her hands on her hips. "What's got you thinking so hard?" Lila hesitated, then slipped the card from her pocket, holding it out like a secret. Marissa's eyebrows shot up. "He gave you that?" she asked, her tone a mix of disbelief and suspicion. "What's his angle?" "He thinks I won't know what to do with it," Lila said softly, her fingers fidgeting. "Like I'm too simple to matter." Marissa's face hardened. "That man's got no soul. You be careful, Lila. He's not playing for your benefit." "I know," Lila said, her voice steadier than she felt, "but I'm not playing his game. I'm thinking, maybe I can use it for something good, for the kids back home." Marissa's expression softened, a flicker of pride in her eyes. "Your mama would have loved that heart of yours," she said, "but don't let him catch you dreaming too big. Men like him don't like being outdone." The day passed in a blur of chores, but Lila's thoughts were on the community center in Harlem, a dilapidated building she passed daily, its windows boarded, its walls tagged with graffiti. It had once been a haven for kids, a place for art classes and homework help, but it had closed years ago, leaving the neighborhood's children to the streets. Lila's mother had volunteered there, her laughter filling its halls. If Lila could bring it back, even for a moment, it would be worth Elliot's scorn. That afternoon, Jimmy arrived with a delivery of fresh linens, his warm smile breaking through Lila's thoughts. "You look like you're plotting something," he teased, setting the boxes down. His ebony skin glistened faintly with sweat, his brown eyes catching hers with that familiar, unspoken warmth. Lila glanced around, ensuring they were alone, then showed him the card. "Elliot gave me this," she whispered. "Told me to spend whatever I want." Jimmy's eyes widened, then narrowed. "That rich boy's messing with you, Lila. He's got no right." "I know," she cut in, her voice firm. "But I'm not going to buy dresses or jewelry. I'm thinking about the community center. For the kids." Jimmy's expression softened, a slow grin spreading. "That's my Lila Grace," he said, his voice low, proud. "Always thinking of everybody else." He paused, his gaze lingering. "You sure about this? He's not going to like you using his money for something real." "Let him be mad," Lila said, surprising herself with the fire in her voice. "He gave me the card. I'll use it my way." Jimmy chuckled, shaking his head. "All right, but I'm with you, whatever you need." As the week unfolded, Lila began her quiet rebellion. She contacted the community center's old director, a kind-eyed woman named Mrs. Jenkins, and learned the building needed $50,000 to reopen. Repairs, supplies, staff. Lila's heart raced as she made the first purchase, a contractor to fix the roof. The card went through without a hitch, and a thrill shot through her. She bought paint, books, art supplies, each transaction a small act of defiance against Elliot's mockery. But Elliot's temper grew darker. At a dinner party that Friday, he snapped at Lila for a minor spill, his voice cutting through the room. "Can't you do anything right?" he barked, his icy blue eyes flashing. The guests, wealthy investors in sleek suits and glittering gowns, exchanged amused glances. One woman, her blonde hair swept into an updo, leaned toward her companion. "The help these days," she murmured, loud enough for Lila to hear. Lila's cheeks burned, but she kept her head down, her hands trembling as she cleared the table. Later in the kitchen, Marissa pulled her aside. "You're playing a dangerous game with that card," she warned. "He's gonna notice soon." "I know," Lila said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I can't stop now. The center's coming together. You should see the kids' faces when they talk about it reopening." Marissa sighed, her hand squeezing Lila's shoulder. "Just watch your back." The next day, disaster struck. Elliot stormed into the staff room, his face pale with rage, holding a bank statement. "Who's been using my card?" he demanded, his voice a low growl. The staff froze, eyes darting. Lila's heart stopped, but she stepped forward, her hands clasped tightly. "It was me, sir," she said, her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her chest. Elliot's eyes narrowed, his lips curling into a sneer. "You? What? Buying shoes? A purse?" His tone dripped with condescension. "No, sir," Lila said, meeting his gaze. "I'm fixing the community center in Harlem, for the kids." The room went silent. Elliot's face twitched, a mix of disbelief and fury. "You think you can just spend my money on some charity project?" he spat. "You're nothing but a maid. Know your place." The words hit like a slap, but Lila held her ground, her mother's voice echoing in her mind. "You gave me the card," she said softly. "You told me to use it." Elliot's jaw tightened, his hands clenching. "Get out," he said, his voice dangerously low. "You're done here." Marissa stepped forward, her eyes blazing. "You're making a mistake, Mr. Carver. Lila's worth 10 of you." Elliot ignored her, turning away. Lila gathered her things, her heart heavy, but her resolve unbroken. As she left, Jimmy was waiting by the service entrance, his face tight with worry. "You okay?" he asked, his hand brushing hers. "I will be," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "This isn't over." That night, alone in her apartment, Lila stared at the card, still in her possession. She'd spent $30,000 already, and the center was nearly ready. She wouldn't let Elliot's cruelty stop her, not now. Word had spread through Harlem like wildfire, whispers of a mysterious benefactor reviving the old community center. Lila walked its halls now, her hands covered in paint, her simple dress dusted with sawdust. The building hummed with life, contractors hammering, volunteers stacking books. But as she directed a group of kids to help with murals, her phone buzzed. Elliot's number. Her heart sank. "You think this is over?" His voice snarled through the line. "You've humiliated me enough." Lila returned to the penthouse the next morning, not as an employee, but summoned by Elliot's curt text. She needed the card back in his hands, or so she told herself, but deep down, she wanted to face him, to show him she wasn't broken. Her mahogany skin flushed with nerves, her coiled hair loose for once, framing her face like a crown. She wore a plain blouse and jeans, her posture straighter than before, though her fingers twisted the hem of her shirt. Elliot was in his study, pacing like a caged animal, his slicked-back hair disheveled, his blue eyes bloodshot. Papers scattered the desk, bank statements, receipts. "You've spent over 40 grand, he said, his voice a low rumble. "On what? Some rundown shack for street kids?" Lila met his gaze, her voice soft but unwavering. "It's more than that. It's a place for them to dream, like my mama wanted for me." He laughed, a bitter sound. "Dream? You're a maid, Lila. Dreams are for people who matter." He snatched the card from her outstretched hand, his fingers brushing hers coldly. "Get out of my sight." But as she turned to leave, he called after her. "Wait." His tone shifted, curious, mocking. "Show me. I want to see what my money bought." Lila's stomach twisted. Was this another game? But she nodded, leading him out to his sleek black car, the driver eyeing her curiously. The ride to Harlem was silent, Elliot scrolling his phone, Lila staring out at the changing cityscape, from gleaming towers to cracked sidewalks. Her mind raced with memories, her mother's tired smile after long days cleaning, her whispered stories of teaching children to read. They arrived at the center, its facade freshly painted, kids' laughter spilling from open doors. Lila guided him inside, her steps tentative. Mrs. Jenkins greeted them warmly, her eyes widening at Elliot's expensive suit. You must be the generous donor, she said, shaking his hand. Elliot's lips curled. Hardly. He wandered the rooms, his gaze dismissive. The new bookshelves, the art supplies, the computer lab she'd funded. A group of children, wide-eyed and giggling, clustered around Lila. "Miss Lila, who's the fancy man?" one boy asked, his small hand tugging her sleeve. She knelt, her brown eyes gentle. "Just a visitor, sweetie." Elliot snorted. "This is what you chose? Toys and paint? Pathetic. You could have bought yourself a life, clothes, a car, something to make you less ordinary." The words stung, but Lila rose slowly, her voice quiet. "This is a life. For them." He shook his head, turning to leave, but paused at the door. "You're fired for good, and don't think about coming back." His driver pulled away, leaving Lila amid the chaos of renewal, her heart aching but her resolve steeling. Back at the penthouse, Elliot's anger festered. He called a meeting with his staff, Marissa among them, her face tight with disapproval. "That girl's gone rogue," he ranted, aiming a fist on the table. "Using my money like she's some saint." Marissa's hazel eyes flashed. "Maybe she is compared to you. You gave her the card, Mr. Carver. What did you expect?" He glared at her. Loyalty, obedience, not this charity nonsense. Marissa stood her ground, her hands on her hips. "Loyalty's earned, not demanded. You treat us like dirt, and wonder why we don't bow." The other staff shifted uncomfortably, but Elliot's face reddened. "Watch your tone, or you're next." That evening, Jimmy found Lila at the center helping kids with homework. His lanky frame leaned against the door, his warm smile fading at her expression. "He came here?" Jimmy asked, his voice tight. She nodded, her fingers tracing a child's drawing. "Called it pathetic. Said I'm ordinary." Jimmy's eyes darkened. He's the pathetic one. Hiding behind money. No heart. He sat beside her, his hand covering hers briefly. "You're extraordinary, Lila Grace. Always have been." She blushed, pulling away gently, her shyness returning. But his words lingered, a balm against Elliot's barbs. The next day, tension escalated. Elliot hosted a brunch for his elite circle, investors, socialites, in the penthouse garden. Lila wasn't invited, but Marissa whispered that he'd been ranting about her betrayal. Unbeknownst to her, one guest, a sharp-tongued woman named Victoria with porcelain skin and a predatory smile, had heard rumors. "So, Elliot," Victoria purred over mimosas, "I hear your maid's playing Robin Hood with your fortune." How quaint. The table erupted in laughter, Elliot's face flushing. "She's nothing. A nobody trying to feel important." Marissa, serving nearby, overheard, her jaw clenching. She accidentally on purpose spilled coffee near Victoria's lap, earning a glare. "Clumsy help," Victoria snapped. Elliot waved it off. "They're all the same. Replaceable." Later, Marissa called Lila, her voice urgent. "He's bad-mouthing you to everyone, saying you stole from him." Lila's heart plummeted. She wasn't a thief, but the whispers spread, through staff to neighbors, even Rhea. Ching Jimmy's delivery routes. "People are talking," he told her that night, his face worried. "Saying you took advantage." The peak came at a neighborhood gathering Lila attended, volunteers celebrating the center's progress. But a man in the crowd, a friend of a friend connected to Elliot's world, sneered. "Heard you're funded by stolen money. Some maid thinking she's better than her station." The room quieted, eyes on Lila. Her cheeks burned, tears pricking her eyes. She stood, her voice trembling. "It wasn't stolen. He gave it to me." Laughter rippled, dismissive. "Sure, honey. Rich white man hands over his card to a black maid out of kindness? Pull the other one." Jimmy stepped forward, his posture defensive. "Back off. You don't know her." But the damage was done. Lila fled to the back room, her body shaking, the humiliation crashing over her. She'd been mocked, overlooked her whole life, but this, being painted as a thief, a joke, cut deepest. Her mother's dream felt tainted now, her strength fracturing. That night, alone, Lila curled on her bed, sobs racking her frame. The card was gone, but the pain lingered. Yet in the darkness, a fire kindled. She wouldn't let Elliot win. The gala he was hosting next week, his big investor event, she'd go. She'd show him, show them all, what ordinary could achieve. The gala's grand ballroom pulsed with the elite's chatter, crystal chandeliers casting a golden haze over designer gowns and tuxedos. Lila stood at the entrance, her heart thundering, the gown she'd bought with Elliot's card, hugging her curves like a second skin, deep emerald silk that made her mahogany skin shimmer. "This is for everything you've taken from me," she whispered to herself, stepping forward as Elliot's eyes locked on hers from across the room, his face draining of color. Lila had spent the week preparing, her shyness giving way to a quiet fury. The Siahun Immunity Center was set to open tomorrow, fully funded by the card before Elliot snatched it back. She'd used the last of it on this gown, not for vanity, but as armor. Jimmy had driven her here, his warm eyes filled with concern as he squeezed her hand. "You don't have to do this alone," he'd said, his lanky frame tense in the car. But she did. This was her turning point. The doorman eyed her invitation, a forged one from Marissa's insider help, but waved her through. Inside, the air smelled of perfume and privilege. Elliot was holding court near the bar, his slicked-back hair perfect, his tailored tuxedo accentuating his sharp features. His icy blue eyes scanned the room, but when they landed on Lila, he froze, whiskey glass midway to his lips. She moved through the crowd with deliberate grace, her coiled hair cascading in soft waves, a few strands framing her almond-shaped eyes. Whispers followed her. "Who is she?" Stunning, but out of place. A few recognized her from the penthouse, their brows furrowing. Victoria, the sharp-tongued socialite from the brunch, sidled up to Elliot. "Is that your former maid? How bold!" Elliot's jaw tightened, his posture rigid as he set down his glass. He crossed the room in long strides, his face a mask of controlled rage. "What the hell are you doing here?" he hissed, grabbing her arm lightly, steering her toward a quieter alcove. His touch was electric, not gentle, his pale skin contrasting sharply with hers. Lila pulled away, her voice low but steady. "You invited the world to celebrate your success. I thought I'd share mine." His eyes narrowed, confusion flickering beneath the anger. "Success? You're delusional. Get out before I have security drag you." But Lila didn't budge. Her hands, usually fidgeting, were steady at her sides. "You gave me that card to mock me, to prove I'm nothing. But I built something real with it. The community center opens tomorrow. Kids have a safe place because of what you called pathetic." Elliot scoffed, but his voice wavered slightly. "My money, my rules. You stole—" "I used what you two threw at me," she interrupted, her brown eyes locking onto his blue ones. "And now everyone here will know the truth about you." Before he could respond, the MC announced the evening's speeches. Elliot was slated to speak, touting his latest app launch. As he took the stage, his smile forced, Lila slipped toward the front, her heart pounding. Marissa, working the event in her crisp uniform, caught her eye from the sidelines, nodding encouragement. Her graying braids were neat, her hazel eyes fierce with support. Elliot began his speech, his voice smooth, charismatic. "In a world of data and innovation, we build empires that connect us all." The crowd applauded politely, but Lila felt the moment building. She raised her hand during the QA, her voice cutting through the murmurs. "Mr. Carver, a question about generosity." He blinked, spotting her, his grip tightening on the podium. "Yes?" he said through gritted teeth. "You recently gave your credit card to someone in need," Lila said, her tone even, projecting for the room. "What inspired that act of kindness?" The crowd shifted, intrigued. Elliot's face paled further. "I don't recall." "But you do," she pressed, stepping closer to the stage. "You gave it to me, your maid, to see what someone like me would do. You expected frivolity, but I rebuilt a community center for Harlem's children. With your money, yes, but with my heart." Gasps rippled through the audience. Phones emerged, recording. Victoria's eyes widened in delight at the scandal. Elliot's hands shook. "This is inappropriate. Security?" "No," Lila said, her voice rising, raw emotion breaking through. "You humiliated me, called me ordinary, replaceable. You mocked my dreams, my mother's memory. But look around. You're the empty one. All this wealth, and you're alone, angry at the world because no one sees past your facade." Elliot's eyes glistened, his rigid posture cracking. He stepped down from the podium, the room silent except for the click of heels and murmurs. "You have no idea what you're talking about," he whispered, but his voice broke. Lila's own eyes welled, her vulnerability spilling out. "I do, because I've seen you, raging at nothing, pushing everyone away. You're hurting, Elliot. But hurting others won't fix it. He stared at her, the crowd a blur around them. Something shifted in his expression, anger giving way to a raw, exposed pain. His childhood flashed in his mind, absent parents, boarding schools, success as a shield against loneliness. Lila's words pierced that shield. Before he could speak, Jimmy appeared at the edge of the crowd, having snuck in through a side door. His ebony skin and casual hoodie stood out, but his eyes were on Lila, protective. "Lila, you okay?" he called softly. She nodded, but the moment hung heavy. Elliot turned to the audience, his voice trembling. "She's right. I gave her the card as a joke. A cruel one. And she did more with it than I ever could." Murmurs grew louder. Marissa stepped forward, her hands clasped, tears in her eyes. "About time you admitted it," she said quietly. Elliot's shoulders slumped, the reversal crashing over him. He looked at Lila, truly seeing her for the first time, her strength, her beauty, her depth. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice barely audible. But it wasn't enough. Not yet. Lila turned away, the bold move complete, but the emotional waves just beginning. As she walked toward Jimmy, the crowd parted, whispers turning to applause for her courage. Elliot stood alone on the stage's edge, the turning point etching itself into his soul. For the first time, he felt the weight of his own heart breaking, not from loss, but from the truth she'd forced him to face. The ballroom seemed to hold its breath, the applause for Lila swelling like a wave crashing against Elliot's crumbling defenses. Victoria's delighted gasp echoed, her hand over her mouth, as phones captured the mogul's uncharacteristic vulnerability. His shoulders slumped, his sigh eyes glistening with unshed tears. Whispers erupted like sparks in dry grass, spreading through the gala's elite crowd. Guests in their glittering attire exchanged wide-eyed glances, the air thick with shock and schadenfreude. "Did he just apologize?" murmured a silver-haired investor, his tuxedo straining over his belly, to his wife, whose diamond necklace caught the light like a noose. "To the maid? This is gold." Nearby, a young tech entrepreneur, her sleek bob framing sharp features, typed furiously on her phone, live tweeting the drama. "Elliot Carver just got served by his own staff. #gala takedown." Elliot stood frozen on the stage's edge, his pale face flushed, his rigid posture finally cracking under the weight of exposure. He scanned the room, seeing not admiration, but pity, judgment. His hands, usually steady in boardrooms, trembled as he descended the steps. Victoria approached him first, her predatory smile intact. "Well, darling, that was unexpected. Your little charity case has claws." Her words were laced with faux sympathy, but her eyes gleamed with the thrill of his downfall. He brushed past her, his voice a hoarse whisper. "Not now." For the first time, Elliot felt the roles reversing, the hunter becoming the hunted. He, the ruthless mogul who crushed competitors without a second thought, was now the one laid bare. Lila, still at the front, felt the shift too. The applause washed over her, warm and affirming, but her heart raced with a mix of triumph and trepidation. Her emerald gown suddenly felt like a spotlight, her coiled hair a banner of defiance. Jimmy pushed through the crowd to her side, his hoodie a stark contrast to the finery, his ebony skin and warm eyes a grounding force. "You did it," he said, his voice low, his hand finding hers. "Look at them. They see you now." She squeezed his hand, her brown eyes misty. "I didn't come for applause. I came for truth." But as guests began approaching her, the reversal deepened. A middle-aged woman in a sapphire dress extended a manicured hand. "That took guts, dear. What's this community center? I'd love to donate." Others nodded, pulling out checkbooks or phones to transfer funds. Lila's quiet act of rebellion had ignited a chain reaction, turning Elliot's mockery into a catalyst for genuine support. Marissa, from the sidelines, watched with tears streaming down her medium-brown cheeks. Her crisp uniform felt less like a barrier now, more like a badge. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, her graying braids swaying as she moved toward Lila. "Child, you just turned this whole room upside down," she said, pulling Lila into a hug. Her voice cracked with pride, her hands gripping tightly, as if to anchor them both in this new reality. The ripple extended beyond the ballroom. By morning, social media buzzed with clips of the confrontation. Hashtags like #MaidToMillionaire and #Carver exposed trending. Elliot's investors called emergency meetings, their voices terse over conference lines. This PR nightmare could tank the stock, one barked, his frustration palpable. Elliot, holed up in his penthouse, scrolled through the feeds, his blue eyes hollow. Notifications piled up, colleagues distancing themselves, partners questioning his judgment. His anger, once a weapon, now turned inward, gnawing at the loneliness he'd buried under success. In Harlem, the community center buzzed with a different energy. Volunteers gathered early, the fresh paint smell mingling with coffee. Mrs. Jenkins, her kind eyes sparkling, showed Lila the influx of online donations. "After that video went viral, we've got enough to run for a year," she said, her voice awed. Kids clustered around Lila, their small faces upturned. "You're famous, Miss Lila," a girl with pigtails exclaimed, hugging her legs. Lila knelt, her gentle smile hiding the emotional whirlwind. "No, sweetie, we're all heroes here." Jimmy stayed close, his easy stride now protective as Reppy. Orters lingered outside. "This is blowing up," he said, his brown eyes serious. "People are calling you an inspiration." But he saw the toll, the way her hands fidgeted more, her shyness creeping back amid the attention. He pulled her aside in a quiet corner, his voice soft. "You okay? Really?" Lila leaned against the wall, her breath shaky. "It's overwhelming. I just wanted to honor Mama's dream, not this." Her eyes welled, the vulnerability surfacing. Jimmy hesitated, then wrapped his arms around her, his unspoken love a quiet strength. "You've got me," he murmured. "Always." Back at the penthouse, Elliot's world inverted further. Staff whispered in hallways, their deference replaced by wary glances. Marissa confronted him in the kitchen, her hands on her hips, her hazel eyes unyielding. "You see what you've done? That girl's heart is gold, and you tried to tarnish it." Elliot sat at the counter, his head in his hands, his suit rumpled from a sleepless night. I thought it was a game." His voice was raw, the perpetual anger cracking to reveal the boy beneath, the one neglected by parents who valued boardrooms over bedtime stories. Marissa's expression softened slightly, but her tone remained firm. "Games hurt people, Mr. Carver. Time to grow up." She left him there, the silence amplifying his isolation. As the day wore on, roles continued to swap. Lila fielded calls from philanthropists, her once overlooked voice now sought after. Elliot, meanwhile, faced a board call where his leadership was questioned. "This humility act, is it real?" a director probed. He swallowed his pride, admitting, "It has to be." By evening, the ripple reached a peak at an impromptu community gathering at the center. Neighbors filled the rooms, sharing stories of how Lila's actions inspired them. Jimmy stood beside her on a makeshift stage, his hand in hers publicly for the first time. "Lila Grace showed us what one person can do," he said, his voice steady, though his heart raced with nerves. Elliot arrived unannounced, slipping in the back. His tailored coat over jeans, a rare casual look. He watched from the shadows, his blue eyes tracing Lila's graceful movements, the way she nurtured the crowd with her warmth, jealousy mixed with regret. She had what he lacked, genuine connections. As applause filled the room again, he felt the final reversal. He was the outsider now, yearning for a place in her world. The night ended with Lila stepping outside for air, Jimmy at her side. Elliot approached hesitantly, his posture no longer rigid. "Can we talk?" he asked, his voice vulnerable. She nodded, the roles fully reversed, she the one with power, he the supplicant. The Harlem night air carried the faint hum of the city, streetlights casting long shadows over the community center's freshly painted steps. Lila stood there, her emerald gown slightly rumpled from the evening's chaos, her coiled hair catching the breeze. Jimmy lingered close, his hoodie zipped against the chill, his warm brown eyes watchful. Elliot approached slowly, his tailored coat open, revealing the tuxedo beneath, rumpled now, like his composure. His pale face was drawn, the sharp lines of his jaw softened by exhaustion, his icy blue eyes searching hers with an unfamiliar humility. "Lila," he said, his voice rough, barely above the murmur of neighbors spilling out from the gathering. "Please, just hear me out." She crossed her arms, her posture straight but guarded, her mahogany skin glowing under the lamps. Jimmy tensed beside her, his lanky frame shifting protectively, but Lila placed a gentle hand on his arm. "It's okay, Jimmy. I can handle this." Her voice was steady, the shyness that once defined her now a faint echo, replaced by the strength she'd unearthed. Elliot glanced at Jimmy, a flicker of jealousy in his eyes, but he nodded. "I deserve whatever you say, but after tonight, after everything—" He trailed off, his hands gesturing hopelessly, a mannerism so unlike his usual curt precision. The man who commanded boardrooms now stood exposed, the gala's fallout stripping away his armor. Inside the center, the gathering wound down, but word of Elliot's arrival spread quickly. Mrs. Jenkins poked her head out, her kind eyes narrowing. Neighbors lingered, phones in hand, capturing the moment subtly. Marissa emerged from the side door, her crisp uniform traded for a simple sweater and jeans, her graying braids loose. She'd come straight from the penthouse, drawn by the viral buzz. "Mr. Carver," she said, her hazel eyes sharp. "Didn't expect to see you slumming it here." Elliot winced, but didn't snap back. "Marissa, I need to make this right." His voice cracked slightly, the perpetual anger that fueled him now a hollow echo. Lila tilted her head, her almond-shaped eyes studying him. "Right? You think words fix years of belittling, of making me feel small?" Her tone was calm, but laced with the pain she'd carried. The microaggressions, the dismissals, the way he'd tossed that card like a bone to a dog. He ran a hand through his slicked-back hair, disheveling it further. "I was wrong. Blind. I built everything on control, on winning, because that's all I knew." His backstory surfaced unbidden, his voice lowering. "My parents shipped me off to schools, measured love in allowances. I thought power meant never needing anyone. But you took my stupid game and turned it into something real, something I could never do." Jimmy scoffed softly, his arms crossed. "Took you long enough to figure that out." His easy confidence masked the protectiveness, the unspoken love that had simmered for years. Elliot met Jimmy's gaze, then looked away, shame coloring his cheeks. "You're right, all of you." He turned back to Lila. "The center, it's incredible. I saw the kids' faces tonight. That's worth more than any app I've launched." He paused, his blue eyes glistening. "I'm canceling the charges, and I'll fund it fully. No strings." Murmurs rose from the growing crowd, neighbors, volunteers, even a few reporters who'd trickled in. Phones lit up, live streams capturing Elliot's unraveling. One woman, a mother from the block with weary eyes and a toddler on her hip, called out, "You think money fixes your mouth? The way you talk to her?" Elliot's shoulders sagged, the public shaming hitting like a tide. He nodded, accepting it. "No, it doesn't." He stepped closer to Lila, his voice dropping. "I humiliated you, mocked you. And for what? Because you scared me. Your kindness, your strength, it's everything I'm not." Marissa stepped forward, her hands on her hips. "About time you admitted it. I've watched you rage for years, treating us like furniture. Lila's got more heart in her pinky than you've got in that cold chest." The crowd nodded, voices rising in agreement. A young man in the back shouted, "Apologize proper!" Others echoed, the recognition of injustice fueling the moment. Elliot, the untouchable millionaire, was now the one on trial, his ruthlessness laid bare. He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. Then, slowly, he knelt on the gritty steps, his expensive pants meeting the Harlem concrete. The crowd gasped, phones flashing. Lila's eyes widened, her breath catching. "What are you—" "I'm sorry, Lila," Elliot said, his voice breaking, tears finally spilling over his pale cheeks. He looked up at her, vulnerable, stripped of pretense. "For every word, every look that made you feel less. For using that card to test you, when I was the one failing. Please, forgive me." His hands clasped together, a gesture of supplication from a man who'd never begged. The air thickened with emotion. Jimmy's jaw tightened, but he stayed silent, respecting Lila's space. Marissa wiped her eyes, her nurturing side surfacing despite her firmness. Neighbors whispered, some recording, others moved to tears by the raw display. Lila's heart twisted, layers of her own pain surfacing, her mother's death, the dreams deferred, the quiet endurance. She knelt too, her gown pooling around her, bringing them eye level. It hurts, Elliot, she said softly, her voice trembling. But I see you now, the real you, under all that anger. She placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch gentle, forgiving. Stand up, we all deserve second chances. He rose shakily, wiping his face, the shame etching deep lines. The crowd erupted in mixed reactions, some cheers, some skeptical murmurs, but the justice felt tangible, earned. Reporters surged forward, questions flying. Mr. Carver, is this a PR stunt? How will you make amends? Elliot faced them, his posture humbled. No stunt. I'll step back from my company if needed. Focus on real impact, starting here. He pledged more funds on the spot, but more importantly his time, volunteering, learning. As the crowd dispersed, Marissa pulled Elliot aside. You mean it? Or is this another game? He met her gaze, sincere. I mean it. You've been like a mother to that house, unseen but essential. I'm sorry for overlooking you too. She nodded, a small smile breaking through. Prove it then. Jimmy drew Lila away, his arm around her shoulders. You didn't have to forgive him, he said quietly, his voice laced with concern. I know, she replied, leaning into him. But holding on to anger. That's his prison, not mine. Her eyes met his, the unspoken connection deepening. Besides, I've got you. He smiled, his crinkled eyes warm. Always. Elliot watched them from afar, a pang in his chest. Not jealousy now, but longing for such authenticity. The night had exposed him, shamed him. But in that vulnerability, seeds of change took root. Justice had arrived, not in vengeance, but in revelation, forcing him to confront the man he'd become. Thought for 13s, the morning sun filtered through the community center's new windows. Sting warm patterns on the freshly varnished floors. Lila moved among the children, her simple blouse and jeans a far cry from the gala's emerald gown. But her mahogany skin glowed with a quiet contentment. At 25, she'd traded the penthouse shadows for this vibrant chaos, laughter echoing off walls she'd helped paint, small hands tugging at her for attention. Her coiled hair was tied back loosely, a few strands escaping to frame her almond-shaped brown eyes, which sparkled with purpose. She knelt beside a boy named Malik, his crayons scribbling furiously on paper. What's this one? She asked, her voice gentle, nurturing, as she pointed to his drawing. A spaceship, he said proudly, his gap-toothed grin infectious. Gonna fly to the stars, like you said we can dream big. Lila's heart swelled, her fingers brushing his shoulder. This was her mother's dream realized. Not in a distant future, but here, now. The center bustled with activity. Art classes in one room, reading circles in another, volunteers like Mrs. Jenkins orchestrating it all with her kind-eyed efficiency. The funding from Elliot's pledge had secured its future, but it was Lila's vision that breathed life into it. She stood, her posture graceful yet grounded, no longer hunching against invisibility. Her hands, once fidgeting with nerves, now moved with confident gestures, pointing out supplies, hugging a shy girl who reminded her of herself. Outside, Jimmy leaned against his delivery truck, his lanky frame relaxed in the autumn breeze. At 28, his ebony skin caught the light, his close-cropped fade neat, his warm brown eyes crinkling as he watched Lila through the window. He'd quit his route job to help run the center's logistics, his casual hoodie and jeans fitting seamlessly into this world. You look happy, he said when she stepped out for a break, his stride easy as he approached, pulling her into a loose embrace. I am, she replied, leaning into him, her head resting against his chest. The unspoken love that had simmered for years had blossomed tentative, in the weeks since the gala. No grand declarations, just quiet moments like this, shared coffees, late-night talks about dreams deferred and futures built together. Jimmy's loyalty, his optimism, had been her anchor through the storm. What about you? No regrets leaving the deliveries? He chuckled, his hand tracing circles on her back. Nah, this is better. Seeing you teach, building something real. It's what I've always wanted for us. His voice softened, a vulnerability peeking through his confident manner. For you, mostly. You've always been the one with the big heart. Lila pulled back slightly, her eyes meeting his. And you've always seen it. Even when I couldn't. They shared a kiss, soft and unhurried, the city noise fading around them. It wasn't perfect. Jimmy's fears of rejection lingered in quiet doubts, but Lila's strength bolstered him, just as his steadiness grounded her. Across town, in the penthouse that once felt like a gilded cage, Elliot sat at his kitchen counter, a mug of coffee steaming untouched before him. At 30, the ruthless edges had softened. His slicked-back dark hair was tousled, his tailored suit replaced by a simple shirt and slacks. His icy blue eyes stared out at the skyline, no longer with conquest, but reflection. The board had accepted his step back. A sabbatical, they called it, to focus on personal growth. His gestures were slower now, less curt, as if the weight of his past anger had lifted, leaving space for something new. Marissa bustled in, her graying braids pinned neatly, her medium brown skin warm under the morning light. At 45, she still commanded the household with quiet authority, her hands on her hips as she eyed him. "You gonna drink that, or just stare at it?" she asked, her hazel eyes twinkling with a mix of sternness and affection. Elliot managed a small smile, his posture less rigid. "Lost in thought." He paused. "Wait," his voice carrying a newfound humility. "How's the center? I saw the article. Grand opening was a hit." Marissa poured herself a cup, sitting across from him, a liberty she'd never taken before the gala. "Thriving. Lila's a natural teacher. Kids adore her." Her tone softened, revealing the maternal layers she'd hidden behind efficiency. "You did good, funding it anonymously. No fanfare." He nodded, his fingers drumming lightly on the counter, a rare fidget echoing Lila's old habit. "It wasn't about me. Not anymore." The weeks had been a quiet unraveling. Therapy sessions delving into his neglected childhood, apologies to staff he'd dismissed, even reaching out to distant family. The heartbreak from Lila's choices hadn't shattered him irreparably. It had cracked open the facade, allowing light in. "I visit sometimes," he admitted quietly, "from across the street. Watch the kids play." Marissa's eyebrows rose. "Stalking now? That's progress?" But her smile was genuine, her hand patting his arm. "You're changing, Mr. Carver. Elliot. It's good to see." He looked at her, truly seeing the woman who'd kept his world running for years. "Thank you, Marissa, for everything. I was blind to it all." She waved it off, but her eyes misted. "We all have our burdens. Yours was anger, mine was sacrifice for my own kids. But look at us now, still standing." The day unfolded gently. Lila led a class on storytelling. The children circled around her, their faces alight. She shared tales from her mother's life, weaving in lessons of resilience and kindness. One girl with braids like Marissa's raised her hand. "Miss Lila, did you ever feel scared? Like, not good enough?" Lila paused, her emotional layers surfacing, the hidden grief for her mother, the unspoken dreams. "All the time," she said honestly, her voice warm. "But I learned that strength isn't about never falling. It's about getting up, helping others along the way." The room nodded, absorbing the moral like a seed planted. Jimmy poked his head in, holding a box of donated books. "Special delivery," he teased, his eyes lingering on her with that familiar warmth. As the class ended, he pulled her aside in the hallway, his body language easy but intent. "I love you, Lila Grace. Always have." Her breath caught, tears pricking her eyes. "I love you too, Jimmy." It was a quiet confession, raw and believable, sealing their arc in mutual vulnerability. Evening brought a surprise visitor. Elliot arrived at the center's door, his coat over his arm, his steps hesitant. The kids had gone home, leaving the space serene. Lila looked up from her desk, her expression neutral but open. "Elliot." He shifted, his blue eyes meeting hers without the old arrogance. "I didn't come to intrude, just to see it up close." He wandered the rooms, touching the bookshelves, the art on the walls. "This is what matters," he said softly, "not empires of data. Real change." Lila joined him, her grace matching his newfound humility. "It broke your heart, didn't it? What I chose." He nodded, a faint smile touching his lips. "In the best way. Forced me to look at mine." They sat on a bench outside, the city lights twinkling. "I'm leaving New York for a bit. Travel, volunteer, find what's missing." She nodded, her hand briefly covering his in a gesture of closure. "You'll find it. We all do, eventually." As he left, waving to Jimmy who watched from the door, Elliot glanced back one last time. Lila and Jimmy stood together, her head on his shoulder, the center's sign glowing behind them. He walked away with a quiet smile, the moral etching into his soul. True wealth lay in connections, in lifting others, not in control. The night deepened, Lila locking up, her heart full. Reflections lingered, the injustices faded, replaced by earned justice, raw emotions giving way to peace. In the quiet, she whispered to the stars, "For you, Mama." And the world felt a little more whole,